All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a huge topic, one that's shaping our world in ways you can see and a lot of ways you can't. We're talking about how warfare has totally changed in the 21st century.
So, when I say the word warfare, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most people, right, it's probably something historical. You know, old black and white footage, huge battles with soldiers in trenches, maybe some general you learned about in school.
Well, the thing is, the reality of conflict today, it's just so much more complicated than that. Yeah, the traditional stuff is still there, but the modern battlefield, it's not just about tanks and soldiers anymore. Now it's fought with computer code, with propaganda, with economic muscle, all happening on these invisible front lines.
Okay, so let's start with what we know best, right? The physical battlefield. But even here, in this familiar territory of direct confrontation, you'll see that the rules of the game have been completely rewritten.
This is what we call conventional warfare. You know, the classic setup. One country's army versus another's. Think history books. And while you might think it's a thing of the past, it absolutely is not. I mean, look at the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. It's a stark reminder that traditional armies, navies, and air forces are still a major factor in the world.
But what about when the two sides are, well, totally mismatched? What happens when a massive military power goes up against a much smaller, maybe even non-state group? That's when things get asymmetrical. It's that classic David versus Goliath story, and the rulebook just gets thrown out the window.
See, the weaker side knows they can't win a straight-up fight. It'd be over in a flash. So what do? They change the rules of the game. They use things like guerrilla tactics. They start an insurgency. They might even resort to terrorism, all to get around the big guy's military power. They're trying to turn their opponent's greatest strengths into their biggest vulnerabilities.
All right, but here's where things get really 21st century. The biggest changes in warfare aren't even happening on a physical battlefield. No, they're happening on these invisible front lines. Places where entire conflicts can unfold without a single shot ever being fired.
And the first, most obvious invisible battlefield? It's the digital one, cyber warfare. And look, we're not just talking about someone hacking an email account here. This is about weaponizing code itself. It's about using digital attacks to achieve huge military or political objectives.
Just think about the goals for a second. This isn't just about military targets. We're talking about shutting down an entire country's power grid, or paralyzing its communication systems, or bringing its economy to a screeching halt. These attacks are designed to create maximum chaos, and it all can be done from a keyboard, maybe thousands of miles away, directly impacting civilian life.
And that leads us right into something very closely related: information warfare. This one is different. It targets something incredibly personal, something fundamental, your mind. It's a battle for your perception of reality, for your trust in what you see and what you hear.
You might have heard the phrase, winning hearts and minds. Well, this is the dark side of that. More often than not, it's about creating so much confusion, so much doubt and distrust that you paralyze your opponent from the inside out. It literally turns a population's own thoughts and beliefs into the battlefield.
So it's super important to realize that these different kinds of war, the physical stuff, the cyber attacks, the info campaigns, they don't just happen on their own in neat little boxes. No way. Modern states are getting really good at blending them all together into one powerful, messy strategy. And we call that hybrid warfare.
And here's a perfect example of how that works. A country could start by putting military pressure on its neighbor's border. At the exact same time, it launches cyber attacks against their power plants and banks. And while that's happening, a massive propaganda campaign starts online to create chaos and division. Oh, and they'll throw in some economic sanctions just to squeeze them even more. The end result? You're completely destabilizing another country, and you never even had to formally declare war.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how these conflicts are fought. But what about who is doing the fighting? Well, that's also gotten way more complicated. And a lot of the time, that confusion is on purpose.
This brings us to the idea of a proxy war. If that sounds like something from the Cold War, you're right, but it is absolutely still a thing today. It's basically when big, powerful countries get other groups or smaller countries to fight their battles for them. Why? Because it lets them compete for influence and push their own agendas, all while avoiding the terrifying risk of fighting each other directly.
And you know, sometimes the absolute worst conflicts aren't between countries at all. but happen right inside their own borders. We're talking about internal conflicts, or civil wars. But here's the catch. It's almost never just an internal fight. More often than not, these wars are being fueled by outside powers with their own interests, effectively turning that country into another proxy battlefield.
So with all this in mind, what's next? Where is all of this heading? Let's take a look at the future of warfare, at the new frontiers of conflict.
Okay, if you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. In modern conflict, the lines are blurred on purpose. The whole point is to make it incredibly hard to tell the difference between a state of peace, a crisis, or an actual all-out war. That ambiguity, that's the strategy.
And just look at how specialized it's become. This list here is just a tiny snapshot. We're talking about trade wars fought with tariffs to cripple an economy, electronic warfare to jam an enemy's communications right on the battlefield. Even really old tactics like a siege are being updated for the modern era. It's staggering, really. The number of potential battlefields is just constantly growing.
And it makes you wonder, right? As technology just keeps marching forward, what new arenas for conflict will open up? I mean, we went from land and sea to the air and now to cyberspace. So what's the next battlefield?
And this might sound like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's very real. Nations are right now, today, developing ways to weaponize the ultimate high ground, outer space. Think about that. All those satellites that we rely on for GPS, for our phones, for critical intelligence, they could become the next big targets in a future conflict.
And that really brings us to the final and maybe the most important question. In a world of blended, hybrid conflict, where does the battlefield actually end? I mean, when a war can be fought with a computer virus, or a viral social media post, or by knocking a satellite out of orbit, the battlefield isn't some far-off place anymore, is it? It's everywhere. It's our power grid. It's our news feed. It's even the empty space right above our heads.